Let me ask you something, how would you react if you inherited your grandfather's land, only to be slapped with a $300,000 fine for violations you never committed? And then find out the very people issuing those fines had actually built their houses on your property? Yeah. That's where my story begins. My name's David Miller. And 6 months ago, I was just another laid-off software engineer trying to survive Seattle's tech downturn. One day I was debugging code for a startup's last desperate product release. The next I was staring at a severance-less goodbye and a bank account gasping for breath. Then came the call. My grandfather, Thomas Miller, Tom to his friends, had passed away at 89. The man who taught me to fish, mend fences, and respect the land during those sun-drenched Montana summers, was gone. He left me something I wasn't expecting, his 100-acre ranch in Clear Creek County. I hadn't been there in over a decade. But something about that inheritance tugged at me, nostalgia, maybe. Or just desperation. Seattle rent was a noose tightening by the day. So I packed up my things, hit the road, and pointed my old Subaru toward Montana. I figured I'd clean the place up, sell it, and use the money to start over. But from the moment I turned off the main road and onto that gravel driveway, my life took a turn I could never have predicted. The ranch looked almost frozen in time, same red barn with faded paint, same white farmhouse perched above the creek. But there was something new. Off in the distance, cutting across the horizon like a scar, was a grid of luxury homes, identical, sterile, and utterly out of place. I didn't think much of it at first, until I found the bright white envelope taped to the front door. The seal read Clear Valley HOA, and the letter inside might as well have been written in blood. Mr. Miller, your property has accrued $297,800 in fines over the past 5 years for failure to maintain landscaping, improper fencing, unauthorized agricultural operations, and structural violations. An additional $15,200 in legal and administrative fees is due immediately. Failure to comply will result in a lien placed on the property within 30 days. I stared at the page in disbelief. Unauthorized agricultural operations? On a ranch? My grandfather had been the agriculture. Before I could process, a knock at the door jolted me. I opened it to find a sun-leathered woman in her 70s, wearing a denim jacket and eyes that had clearly seen every kind of Montana weather. You must be Tom's grandson, she said, not wasting a beat. I'm Helen McBride, neighbor, friend, and unofficial keeper of local secrets. She walked in without waiting for an invitation, sat down at the kitchen table like she owned it, and pointed at the HOA notice still shaking in my hand. That's the work of Karen Whitmore, president of the Clear Valley HOA. Been gunning for this land since your grandfather told her where to stick her luxury development. What violations? I asked, dropping into the chair across from her. This house hasn't changed in 40 years. Helen snorted. Karen and her board started creeping their project this way 5 years ago. Bought up the South Ridge, then started claiming your grandfather's land was technically inside their expanded jurisdiction. It's bull. Total fabricated boundary creep. I felt something boil in my chest, part rage, part disbelief. She sent her lawyers? I asked. Helen nodded. Or worse, surveyors. They came out with brand new maps showing the boundary lines had shifted, except your grandfather had the originals. Said if anything happened to him, there was a folder in the study marked boundaries. Told me to make sure you saw it. I didn't wait another second. Inside the study, dusty, untouched, was that exact folder. Inside, an original hand-drawn property map from 1953. Photographs of stone markers and old fencing. And a side note in Grandpa Tom's handwriting, markers are off by 300 yards. They moved the line. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a legal fight. This was a heist, disguised in fine print. And I wasn't about to roll over. By the next morning, I had barely slept. I sat at Grandpa's old desk, That boundary folder spread out in front of me like a roadmap to war. His careful notes. The old property deed from 1953. Even the photos of those stone fence posts, all of it pointed to the same terrifying truth: someone had pushed the boundary lines hundreds of feet into our land. And now, there were houses, real families, living on property that didn't legally belong to them. I needed answers. And I needed help. That's when I called Helen McBride again. We met out by the edge of the field where the barn met the rolling green slope, looking down at the sea of luxury homes that shouldn't have been there. Helen squinted toward the nearest one, tan stucco. Wide windows. Solar panels. That one? Built last year. She muttered. Clubhouse is just behind it. Right over where your granddad used to keep his irrigation tank. I turned to her. Heart pounding. Who did the original survey for these homes? Probably Truman and Halls. Out of Billings, she said. They're Karen's go-to firm. Paid handsomely to look the other way when things get fuzzy. I didn't want fuzzy. I wanted facts. And that meant calling someone outside Karen's circle. That afternoon, I called Bill Langford. A crusty old surveyor Helen swore was the last honest man left in Clear Creek County. He showed up at the ranch the next morning driving a beat-up F-250. GPS tripod strapped to the bed. A Stetson pulled low over his brows. Don't talk much, Helen warned. But he's sharp as a tack. Bill didn't waste time. He walked the entire perimeter of the property with me, pausing at each weathered marker with the same precision as a forensic investigator at a crime scene. At one point, he knelt beside a chunk of concrete buried under weeds and ran his gloved hand across the face. Original marker, he muttered. Installed sometime between 52 and 55. Can tell by the lime aggregate. This one's 312 yards off from the development's claimed boundary. He said it like it was just another Tuesday. But to me, it was a grenade. 312 yards? I echoed. That's not a clerical error. That's intentional. Bill just grunted. Someone moved the fence lines. Looks like they resurveyed based on that. Whole southeast corner's off. I'll need a day to finalize the report. The next afternoon, Bill returned with a rolled-up copy of his findings, bound and notarized. He laid it out on the hood of his truck and jabbed a calloused finger at the shaded area. This, he said, is your land. And this, he shifted to the overlapping section, is what they built on. 10 acres. 10 full acres now occupied by 15 upscale homes. A slice of manicured walking path. And half of the Clear Valley Clubhouse. I could barely breathe. Bill packed up his gear, then handed me a card. You'll want a lawyer who's not afraid of HOA lawsuits. Call Ben Hawkins in Billings. He's my brother-in-law. Knows property law like the back of his hand. After he left, I stood at the edge of the field, staring down at the clubhouse. It was a 2-story monstrosity meant to look like a rustic lodge, stone facade, cedar beams, Tesla charging stations. The works. It sat squarely on what was legally our land. Land my grandfather had protected for generations. I looked down at the survey in my hand, and then across that invisible line they'd crossed, thinking no one would ever notice. Well, someone noticed now. And I wasn't about to stay quiet. You ever walk into a building and feel like the walls are already against you? That was the Clear Valley HOA office, a temple of fake wood, glass, and money. Everything about it screamed power disguised as taste. The receptionist didn't even bother to fake a friendly smile when I said I was there to speak with Karen Whitmore. She's in meetings all afternoon, she said, clicking away at her keyboard. Tell her David Miller is here. And I have a survey showing her community is trespassing on my family's land. That got her attention. 10 minutes later, I was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and an ego that practically oozed from the leather furniture. Karen Whitmore stood from behind her oversized desk with the cool poise of a woman who never loses. Mid-40s. Sleek bob. Black designer suit. The kind of woman who probably practiced smiling in a mirror until she got it just the right amount of soulless. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice smooth as glass. I was sorry to hear about your grandfather. Tom was a stubborn man. I didn't sit. I dropped the notarized survey on her desk like a judge's gavel. Your development sits on 10 acres of Carson land, including half this clubhouse you like to brag about. Her smile barely flinched. Our surveys were conducted by certified professionals. If you disagree, you're welcome to file a complaint through the appropriate legal channels. I will, I said. After I finish filing for fraud and illegal construction, I suggest you stop sending those fine notices before things get worse. Karen's eyes narrowed. Let's speak plainly. Mr. Miller, you're a man out of his depth. You inherited a crumbling ranch. I represent progress, development, value. You could walk away today with a generous offer. No headaches. She tapped a manila envelope on the desk. $200,000 above market value. Sign it. And we forget the past. I stared at her. You built on stolen land. And now you're offering me hush money. Call it compensation for sentimentality, she said with a smirk. But understand something, you're not going to win. I have lawyers, surveyors, permits. And you have nostalgia. She stood. Take the deal, or I'll bury you in court. I said nothing. Just slipped my phone back into my pocket, the voice recording still running. Montana is a one-party consent state. She didn't know that yet. That evening, I called Dana Rosenthal, a name Helen had given me. Dana had moved to Clear Valley 6 months ago, supposedly for a slower pace of life. But in her former life, she was a pit bull of an environmental attorney who'd once taken down an oil company for dumping waste into the Colorado River. Her house looked like a Pinterest board. Her bookshelf, a legal arsenal. You've got a strong claim, Dana said after reviewing Bill's survey. But Karen's not just a neighborhood queen bee, she's got ties to developers, planners, even half the county council. If you go head on, she'll drown you in motions. So what do I do? She smiled, sharp, cunning. We don't go head on. We go under. Dana and I started building a case like a hacker breaks into a system, quiet, methodical, and one document at a time. First, we found the original mineral rights contract in Grandpa's files, a 1975 deal with Western Water Resources, granting them groundwater access beneath the ranch in exchange for annual royalties. According to county transfer logs, those rights were bought out by a shell company named Cascade Developments after WWR folded in the 90s. Guess who owns Cascade? Karen Whitmore. And guess where half the homes in her new subdivision are now sitting? Right on top of those water rights. Second, we combed through archived permits. Dana noticed subtle revisions, 2 surveys submitted years apart. The newer one conveniently nudged the HOA's eastern boundary just enough to cover their newest homes. Dana's jaw clenched. They filed a modified survey without flagging it as a boundary change. That's not just shady. That's a ticking time bomb. Then came the kicker. I played Dana the recording from Karen's office. The part where she threatened to destroy me in court. The part where she offered hush money for stolen land. David, Dana said, her voice low and dangerous, you just hit the motherlode. With this tape, we don't just fight back. We take her entire empire apart. Sometimes, justice needs a stage. So I built one right on the 10 disputed acres, where Karen's shiny development met the rusting fence line of my grandfather's ranch. I set up a folding podium, a PA system, and a makeshift screen strapped to the side of a hay trailer. Dana helped me send out invites to every resident in Clear Valley, and Helen made sure the grapevine carried the message to every neighbor who ever had a bone to pick with Karen Whitmore. The message was simple: come see what your HOA built on land they don't own. That Saturday, the disputed field became the front line in a war Karen never saw coming. Over 100 people showed up, families in lawn chairs, retirees in golf carts, curious newcomers clutching iced coffees. Some came out of loyalty to the HOA. Most came out of suspicion. And a few came with arms crossed and eyes wary. ready to defend what they thought was their property. I stepped up to the mic as Dana adjusted the projector. My name is David Miller. I inherited this land from my grandfather, Thomas Miller, a man many of you probably never met. But what I'm about to show you affects every single person who bought a home in the Clear Valley expansion. I began with the 1953 survey, then layered on Bill Langford's notarized boundary report, pointing out every encroachment, every inch of land where HOA property crossed the legal line. Then I showed the mineral rights contract, highlighting the Cascade Development's acquisition, and Karen's name buried in the corporate ownership structure. Gasps. Murmurs. One man shouted, "Is this real?" Dana stepped forward. "It's not just real, it's fraud." Karen knew where the boundaries were. She had access to all this data and chose to ignore it. Some of you are living on land that's legally still part of the Carson Ranch. Then came the final nail. I played the audio recording. Karen's voice, clear, unshaken, telling me she would bury me in court, offering hush money, and admitting she had surveyors and lawyers in her pocket. The crowd turned. I could feel it, like a shift in the wind. Heads turned toward the back, where Karen stood, arms folded, her face a statue of fury and disbelief. "What's your response, Ms. Whitmore?" someone yelled. Karen stepped forward, heels crunching dry grass. "This is a smear campaign by a man who refuses to move on from the past," she said, lips tight. "We followed every legal process, and changed surveys without disclosure." Dana cut in. "Intimidated residents. Filed bogus fines. Built half your clubhouse on someone else's land." Karen tried to regain composure, but it was too late. A woman near the front, maybe late 30s, stood up. "My family was fined for putting up a backyard swing set. Meanwhile, you were building on stolen land." Another voice, an older man, called out, "My HOA dues went to pay your lawyers." The crowd swelled with questions, demands, and outright outrage. That's when Gerald White, the HOA's legal counsel, walked forward, sweating through his collar. "We need to convene an emergency vote," he stammered. "The bylaws allow it with 2/3 quorum." Dana handed him a clipboard. "Already got signatures." What followed wasn't a vote, it was an avalanche. Karen was officially removed from the HOA board by unanimous decision. Every fine against the Carson Ranch was declared null and void. And under Dana's guidance, a new board was formed, made up of residents, not Karen's cronies. Their first act? Approving a lease agreement for the disputed land, ensuring no one would be evicted, and I'd be fairly compensated for what had been stolen. As the crowd dispersed, many stopped to shake my hand. "I bought into this place for peace," one man said. "But thanks to you, we might finally have some." Karen never said another word. She just turned and walked away, heels sinking slightly into the soil of the land she no longer ruled. I could have taken the money and run. Karen's final offer, $2 million. Clean slate. No lawsuits, was still sitting in my inbox when the HOA vote came through. But I didn't even have to open it to know my answer. Because by that point, I wasn't just holding on to land. I was holding on to a legacy. 6 months after Karen's removal, the Carson Ranch looked like a place reborn. The weeds were gone. The fences were fixed. The old barn, once sagging with time and silence, now stood proud with a fresh coat of red paint and a new sign hanging above the double doors. The Carson Center for Agricultural Learning. It started with an idea Dana tossed out over coffee. "What if this place could be more than just a symbol of beating Karen?" she said. "What if it became hope for people like your grandfather, landowners bullied into silence by HOA thugs?" So we founded Ground Truth, a non-profit legal and educational initiative designed to help small landowners fight back against unlawful HOA abuse. Dana ran the legal side. I handled outreach, tech, and curriculum design. Within 2 months, we had our 501c3 status, a small grant from an environmental education foundation, and a waiting list of families from 3 counties. It turns out, You don't need a mansion to build something powerful. You just need purpose. We turned Grandpa's barn into a classroom space, workbenches for farm demos, a solar-powered irrigation simulator, even a dirt lab where kids learned to test soil quality. The creek became a field study site. Helen donated 6 chickens for the poultry rotation program and came bi-weekly to teach composting like it was a martial art. The old horse corral, now a community garden, run by local residents who had once voted against me at that very HOA meeting. Funny how truth changes people. Even the Clear Valley residents, once blind followers of Karen, came around. Some began volunteering. Others brought their kids to weekend workshops. One retired engineer even helped me install sensor-based irrigation that I coded myself, using leftover gear from my tech days. That part of me, the software guy, never really died. It just found new code to write. Meanwhile, Dana's work with ground truth took off. Within the first year, she'd helped 4 landowners reverse bogus liens, uncovered 2 more cases of boundary manipulation, and got a corrupt HOA dissolved entirely in a neighboring county. People started calling her the HOA Slayer. Karen, last I heard, she left the state. Rumors said she tried to start a new development in Arizona. The media fallout from our story, and the front page feature in the Helena Herald titled "Empire Built on Stolen Soil" followed her like a storm cloud. Investigations opened. Other victims stepped forward. By the end of the year, she'd lost 3 more lawsuits. But me, I stayed. I stood on the same porch Grandpa Tom once watched sunsets from, now joined by kids in mud-streaked boots and parents who'd come to see the land not as a battleground, but a classroom, a gathering place, a future. Next to the gate, I hung a plaque etched with his favorite saying, "Never underestimate a farmer with an old map." That map had saved this place. But more importantly, it helped build something new. A community not ruled by fines, fear, or false authority, but by shared knowledge, honest work, and the stubborn refusal to be bullied. As the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting Montana gold, I realized something simple but profound. I didn't just save my grandfather's land. I found my place in it.